Going into the last round of the Qatar Masters Open, Magnus Carlsen led the field by half a point. He faced Vladimir Kramnik, but neither of those players are really morning people, and Carlsen played very solidly, and Kramnik was also content not to rock the boat, and this game finished very quickly in a draw. Now that meant that just one player could catch Carlsen if he won, the Chinese player Yu Yangyi. Now we know from last year's Qatar Open that he is quite capable of doing the biz in the final round. Remember, he defeated Kramnik to win the tournament last year. Now he had a tough task ahead of him. Yu faced Wesley So, but he got the advantage and, well, ground away. We joined the game after 61 moves. Wesley So is in a difficult position. He has rook and knight against Yu Yangyi's rook and 4 pawns. Now, looks as though it should be winning with the pawns, but that knight is still really tricky and black's piece is very active. You can see that for the moment the rook pins the f-pawn. Of course, white would love to play f4, but that's just not possible at the moment. If the king steps up the board, then knight f3, take a pawn. You could consider giving away a pawn with a7, and in that way freeing the f-pawn, but that's still not as clear as one would wish. You played king g2, just enabling white to now play f4. Knight d3, that knight is still really tricky. And for example, if f4, then knight c5. Now, you know, that knight attacks 2 pawns. Might well be winning that position, but still looks tricky. Remember, they've been playing for, you know, well over 4 hours by this stage, and it is very hard to calculate this kind of position. But you came up with a very nice idea. Rook h6. So he's giving his rook some checking distance, basically. Now rook a5 attacks the g-pawn, and now a7. Of course, this had to be calculated very carefully beforehand. The first thing to note is that there's this very old trick. If the rook takes the pawn, then rook h7. I'm sure you all know that from rook and pawn endgames. Wesley took the pawn on g5. Check. King step back. Now that pawn has to be prevented from queening. Now if rook a5, now here is a nice trick. It's an extension of the one we just looked at. Rook h8, again a very common tactic from rook and pawn endgames. So threatening to queen, and once again if rook takes pawn, then you can give a check. It's a nice trick. So the rook had to go back to the back rank to defend. Now the king drives the knight back, and then the pawn gets going, knight has to go back, and now rook a6, threatening to queen. So now black's rook is completely passive. So Yu has given up 1 pawn, but he's managed to free his pieces, and now he can roll his pawns down the board. The knight is still a little bit tricky, but he deals with it very well. Rook a6 is a nice move, just restricting the knight. And now the pawns roll. This is good fun. And here they go again. So if knight takes pawn, just f7 is winning. And knight b4 was played, and now f7 again. I mean, it's rather beautiful. If the rook is taken, then e7. I mean, it is really Space Invaders time. One of them is going to land. So king b7, and the game ended here. Wesley So resigned in this position. Once again, if knight c6, then you can take, and e7 is rather a nice way to finish the game. So, I mean, a brilliant performance by Yu Yangyi, who joined Magnus Carlsen in equal first position with 7 out of 9. So those 2 at the top. But the organisers wanted to have a clear winner, and so they organised for a blitz playoff to take place. Now, I feel very sorry for Yu Yang because, he had played already 5 hours, where he was given about an hour's break. Carlsen had played about half an hour, and he was probably sitting in the spa in his hotel, so he could relax all day. And it reminded me a little bit of the tie-break in the London Chess Classic, where Carlsen just went straight through to the final and had to play, and then faced one of the players who'd been playing all day, he crushed MVL in the final. So a similar kind of thing. It's a pity, but I think we should. Well, anyway, let me just describe what happened in the tiebreak. Carlsen won the first game very easily with a very smooth attack. So you had to win the second game to tie it and to go to further blitz games. So it's a Nimzo Indian. So not a Ragozin with d5 that's possible in that position, but a pretty standard line of the Nimzo. And Carlsen is playing this very reliable system with b6 and bishop b7, and this is a very well-known variation. Carlsen, in fact, has played this both with white and black in the past. So the rook moves to the side and makes way for the bishop to go back to f8, and now black is flexible. Sometimes that pawn stays on d6 and then goes, or sometimes goes to d5. b4 is the most normal move here, and then, for example, a5 here, and then d6 and knight d7 with a kind of hedgehog position. You played bishop f4, which Carlsen himself has played, curiously enough, against Karyakin. Karyakin here played d6 against Carlsen, but Carlsen very quickly exchanged bishop for knight and played knight c6. This is a very well-known idea in this position. So basically, black is putting pressure on d4 straight away, and it's slightly awkward for white when his knight is stuck out on the other side of the board, out of play. One can protect that d pawn, but then d5, and black is absolutely fine here, but it's probably roughly level. You played d5. It's very clear, in the first game especially, that Carlsen was just playing so quickly, he looked so fresh, and you, obviously exhausted, was hesitating over his moves. It's fatal in blitz. Have to be decisive. This was exchanged, and then knight e5. Here black is absolutely fine. White should exchange and play knight c3, and maybe on a good day black can be slightly better here, but it's roughly level. But instead you blundered with queen d1. Magnus exchanged on d3 and played rook e4 with a very simple double attack, so white loses a piece, and that's the end of that, and Yu Yang decides to resign. Very understandable. So I felt very sorry for him, but both players had a magnificent tournament, and I certainly don't want to take anything away from Magnus, who incidentally had a much better tie-break score than Yu Yang, regardless of this blitz playoff. Well, it's been a fantastic tournament with some amazing games. I don't want to leave you with this playoff game. I'd like to leave you with a bit of sparkle. And one of the viewers on the channel mentioned a game from round 7. Nikita Vityugov and Krishnan Sashkiran. Obviously there's so many interesting games going on. It wasn't possible to cover them all by any stretch. I was basically just focusing on one game a day. But this one is really worth looking at. It's just a really nice tactic. So in this position, white has a beautiful knight on d5, supported by the pawn. But at the moment, these rooks aren't in the game because they're blocked by that pawn. But here, Vityugov cut the Gordian knot and played rook takes pawn. It's just a really sweet little tactic. So Sashkiran took the rook, and that's a check. Now, clearly, if the king steps aside, then there's going to be a decisive discovered check. Or if king f8, then queen h8 will be mate. So f6. And now here's the beautiful tactic that perhaps Sashkiran overlooked. Knight c7, an absolutely wonderful move. So let's go through. First of all, if the queen takes the knight, then queen takes rook, and, well, white probably has a winning endgame. In any case, he's a pawn up. And if queen takes, here's the nice thing. You recapture, and now both rooks are en prise. So if rook takes rook, then knight takes rook. Forking king and rook. Black can bail out into an endgame, but white is a pawn up and has excellent winning chances. So in the game, Sashkiran played rook e7. So that defends the queen. And now another really elegant move. Knight e6 check is possible, but somehow I think knight e8 is more beautiful, actually. Somehow more elegant, and this is a winning move. This knight really has to be taken. If the king goes to these squares, then a knight fork will decide, and, well, king h8, queen f6, followed by this, for example. And if king f7, then this is clearly winning, a check followed by rook takes, and white takes all the pawns, simple win. So black has to take the knight, and, well, for that sparkling combination, white has managed to transpose into an endgame where he is a clear pawn up, but it's a really good pawn and a positionally very good, because white dominates the d-file and black's king is rather exposed. So in fact, white managed to win pretty easily. You know, his piece is dominating this position. But yeah, a beautiful combination from Nikita Vityugov. Thanks very much for watching these videos. I hope you've enjoyed my round reports over the past 10 days. I'm going to be next in action with reports on the Vaikonze tournament that starts on January the 16th. So do join me for that. And in the meantime, Happy New Year.